If I take a look at my layers here, I want to make sure I turn on and be able to work with the viewport layer. Now what we'll be able to do here is we're going to start first with the top view to project all the solid views. Alright, so double check here your layer. We're going to make the viewport layer current. I'll use NV to make a viewport, and I'll cut the boundaries of the viewport right about in this area. Okay, so what I'm going to start with first is I'm going to activate that viewport and working with 2D wireframe and also the top view. Alright, now keep in mind that this is the first viewport that we're using, and also if I set the scale here, that way all of the projected views will have the same scale. Now keep in mind that we're going to show only a partial view of the top, and this is the initial view, so it doesn't matter as long as we have the right view here. Okay, the size doesn't matter, not yet. Once we have these view settings, the top view, 2D wireframe, and this general area of the layout, now we can proceed with Solview. Take a look at modeling here, and you could pin that open. From left to right, we've got Solview, Draw, and Solid Profile. We're going to be using Solview to project all of the standard views, including the auxiliary and section. We're going to use Draw in order to render the visible and hidden lines and also produce the associated layers. Later, we'll reuse this first temporary viewport to show the isometric view of the model, and we'll use Solid Profile to render the visible and hidden edges of that model. So, starting from here, we're going to activate Solview. If you look at the command line here, we have the option to use orthographic, and now we're prompted to specify the side of the viewport that we're going to project. Since this is the top view, we're going to be projecting the front view using this side. So make sure you're using your snap modes. We'll snap to the midpoint here, and then the second thing that you'll do here is you'll determine where's going to be the center of that view. I'm going to do it right about in this area because you got to make sure we're going to make room for the auxiliary and the section view too. So I'm going to make my front view right about in this area, so left click again, and now you should see a view of the model. You can continue adjusting the placement of that view by left clicking in your layout there. Once you decide where you want it, you can hit enter, and now you'll be prompted to crop the viewport. Make sure you have enough room there to accommodate your dimensions. Okay. Once you cut the viewport, immediately name it. And it's very important at this point, you guys, not to mess up with the sequence. I'd suggest if you have a mistake here that you start from the very beginning. Alright? Because it's going to be important when you create a layer here, you're not going to be able to remove that layer or rename it later. So this is the front view. I'll call it front. Hit enter, and now we can proceed. And this time, again, I'll use O for ortho. This time using the front view, we're going to snap to this side, and then we're going to locate the right view. Again, you can keep adjusting with the left mouse button clicks. Once you find the location of the right view, hit enter, and then crop your view for that viewport. Immediately after, name it. Hit enter, and then you can proceed again. Now, before I continue, I want to draw your attention here to those reference lines. You can actually see them in each of those views, right? Those are the reference lines we're going to be using to project the auxiliary views as well as the section view. So before we continue, let's activate the front viewport. Okay? Now before we continue with Solview, make sure we now specify what type of view we want. We want the auxiliary view. Let's do the auxiliary one face, and we're going to be using this reference line over here. Let's make sure we have our O-snap on. Just going to use endpoints here. Make sure I snap to the endpoint of this reference line and this reference line here. Now I'm going to project it to this side over here. So I'll be able to click anywhere on this side of the model. Again, with the left mouse button click, you'll be able to position it. Now remember, for the auxiliary view, it's only going to be a portion of the model. So make sure you just position it in an area where you have enough space to then project the section as well. Okay? Now remember, the top view here is going to be cropped. Once you find the position for the auxiliary, hit enter, then crop the view. It's okay that some of these boundary lines are overlapping. We'll deal with that later. Once you crop it, give it a name. We'll call this auxiliary 1. Hit enter and proceed. Come back to the front view. Once again, we're going to use auxiliary. This time we're going to be using the endpoints here of this reference line. So once again, make sure you turn on those snap modes. Let's use endpoint, and we'll snap from this endpoint to this endpoint here. We'll click on this side of the line. Now we'll project the auxiliary view somewhere in this area. All right, give yourself enough room there for the view as well as for the section view. Oops. Let's try that again. It's too much there. A little bit more. That was too much. Let's try that. Let's see how that works. We can always adjust it later, okay? Hit enter and then crop the view. All right, and then you saw something there, right? It actually snapped all the way to the top right. Don't worry. Don't fret. We can fix this. All right, just finish with the sequence. Give it the name. This is auxiliary 2. All right. Now, in order to fix this, let's escape from the Solview command. And you'll notice if you go back to the paper, here's the viewport, right? The last viewport that we did. You can always just grab the corners of it and then reposition it. All right? So far, we've got the front, the right side, the 2 auxiliaries. Let's replace this one here before we continue with the sections. All right? Now, we don't have to delete it, actually, so let's undo that. We can move it. This can represent the auxiliary view. Right? So I can reposition it, double-click inside of it, and then set it as the isometric view, let's say. Right? Let's make that the southwest isometric view. Or actually, I'll do it like that. Northeast. Okay? Now, return to the layout paper. Okay? And we could activate the front view one more time. You'll notice that all the views, right, show the scale of 1 to 1. But you can still pan and zoom. So make sure you lock these viewports so you don't change the scale by accident or change the orientation of the view by accident. Coming back to the front view, once again, Solview, we're going to do an orthographic projection of this top side here into this area. Hit enter to crop the view and then to name it. Call it top. All right. Now we're ready to do the section views. So let's start first with the auxiliary 1 view. Let's activate that viewport. And now select section as the option in the Solview command. We're supposed to specify the 2 endpoints of the cutting plane line. So once again, I'm going to use my O-snap. Make sure we get those endpoints. I'm going to use this reference line here. Indicate the side from where we want to look, which is this side, the left side. And then also you'll see there, enter the view scale. Since we don't want it to change, just hit enter. And then now we can position it. So you may have to turn on and off your O-snaps, all right, so it doesn't get all crazy here for you. And we'll position it. Now, keep in mind, this might be hard to see right now, right? What part of this view am I going to crop? You may not see it just yet until you actually do the sole draw. So for the moment, you'll see how I'm positioning it, right? I can always come back and adjust it. Okay, I'm just going to push it further, right about there. Hit enter. Now I crop it. And I'll call this one, again, you saw it jump. That's okay. I'll call it section 1. Hit enter, and let's escape. Return to the layout paper. Select the boundaries of that viewport we just created, and then make the adjustment. All right. Let's take a look at the auxiliary face 2 here. We're going to be projecting our section into this area. Activate that viewport. Solview command. Section is the option. Turn on those OSNAP modes for endpoint. And you can see we have a reference line down here. So we use this endpoint here to here, accept the view scale. Click on this side of the reference line. Okay, and then position it. Now you can see I can't get it any lower than I want here, but that's good enough for now. Hit enter, and then we're going to crop the view. So I'm going to turn off the OSNAP here and crop my view. Notice how I can go off the paper. That's fine. Remember, we can reposition. And again, it jumped over. So the view name here is section 2. Finish the command. Exit the command. Return to the layout. I know this may be hard, but try to locate the boundaries of that viewport and then readjust. Okay? Now, let's say in this situation, right, we want to scoot the view closer. Now, right now, we're looking at the solid model, and let's take a look at a more simplified view before we start making those changes. In order to do that, let's go ahead and use the Sol Draw command. But before we do the Sol Draw command, I want you to take a look at the layers real quick. You'll notice here what happened, right? It created all these other layers. You can see, for example, for the front view, you have your dim, your hidden, and your visible layers, okay? We need to make some adjustments here, okay? Real quick, in order to do this very quickly, let's go ahead and create some filters. I'm going to use the property filter here. The way I'm going to use the property filter is I'm going to locate all the visible layers, and these layers all end, they start differently, but they all end in VIS, right? So now you can see I have all of the visible layers here. Let's click OK. That's one filter. Another filter is going to be the hidden layers. All those layers start differently, but they all end in HID. Here's the list of hidden layers. And yet one more. Right? This is going to be for the dimensions. All these layers start differently, but they end in DIM. Okay, there's a couple other layers here that aren't going to be too much trouble just selecting, but look at here. With the filters now, you can see that in my layers list here, I can just isolate all the layers and then do some layer property changes. This saves us time, okay? It's very minimal, but it's time saving anyway. It helps you organize all your layer information just by using property filters. So all those hidden layers are going to be blue. The dimension layers are also going to be blue. So we can select all of the layers at the same time and change the property all at the same time. For the visible layers, these are all going to be cyan. Now, just make sure that when you're finished with property filters, that you revert it all back to all layers. All right? Now, a couple of the layers that we still need to look at here are the hatch layers, the HAT layer. Okay? So if we select those two with control click, we can do the same thing here and just change the color. Now you can see I'm using the standard colors, right? These are all different line weights of black and white. Okay? And now, ready for the magic, right?